So, welcome to tonight's Monday guest stream. I'm going to let everyone join the chat, but as usual, I'm Ricky. Tonight, I'm joined by Adam, as usual, and we've got a very special guest tonight, Mr. Dan Abnett. So, can you tell us about yourself?
My name's Dan Abnett. I am a writer of things. I am a comic book writer, have been for many years now, written for DC, Marvel, 2000 AD, etc., etc., etc. Possibly most notorious for writing the version of Guardians of the Galaxy that became the movies. Written a lot for 2000 AD, written for just about everything. It's easier to list things I haven't written one way or another. I also am a novelist, so I write. I've written an obscene number of novels, many of which are most of which tie in, many of which are for things like Doctor Who and Torchwood and stuff, but most of which are for the Warhammer and Warhammer 40k universe, which I am particularly known for. And when I'm not busy doing those two things, I'm working on games, usually on the writing side or the world building side, and again, most notably there. Alien Isolation, parts of Shadow Mordor. It's been announced that I'm working on the new Warhammer game, which was talked about a few weeks ago. So yes, generally those sorts of things. So generally the realms of science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, and unashamedly a tie-in writer of licensed fiction. Often, those are the things I do.
Great. So, I mean, where did you get started then with writing? How did you get into this realm of fiction?
I've always been, I suppose, creative and always been interested in stories. That's not something I consciously was aware of when I was a young kid. But I loved reading and I loved pictures and I loved stuff like that as a kid. And I used to love drawing as well. So I think my two favourite hobbies when I was a child was reading and drawing pictures. Those are the things I did. My parents were both art teachers, very talented people, creative household, and I think fairly early on, I've always read voraciously. I think reading is a very important part of being a writer. So just reading and almost anything, but reading. The story gets more complicated than that, but in its very basic form, at some point around about the ages of 8 or 9 years old, I discovered comics, as in American Marvel comics particularly, and was captivated by them, and realised that my two favourite hobbies, which is writing stories and drawing pictures, I could do at the same time if I created comics. So I used to write and draw my own comics. That was so many of us did that sort of thing as a way in. And shortly after that, within a year or two of doing that, which became my ongoing hobby, I also discovered role-playing games. The first generations of things like Dungeons & Dragons, and then shortly after that, RuneQuest, Traveller, Call of Cthulhu, things like that. Played them voraciously. I was almost always the referee or dungeon master. So I got used to essentially making shit up as I went along very rapidly for the entertainment of people. And those were, not that I realised at the time, I think sort of training grounds for a very active imagination. And I carried on making my own comics all the way through my teens until there came a point where, although I was a reasonably good artist, I couldn't draw well enough for my own satisfaction, and more particularly, I couldn't draw fast enough to draw all the stories that I wanted to write. And that's the point at which the art side began to fall away, and I began to concentrate more and more on writing. And I ended up getting a degree in English and sort of falling into the comics industry by accident because I was interested in it. And started out on the editorial side. This is at Marvel UK in London in the late 80s, where I worked on things like Thundercats and Transformers, and most particularly the real Ghostbusters, all the licensed properties. So that was the other great addition to my learning curve, is that I learned how comics were built from the inside. Because we were putting them together every week. And they were also very, very straightforward licenses. They were things like Real Ghostbusters, and things like Galaxy Rangers and Thomas the Tank Engine, whatever, where you had to understand the license in order to be allowed to edit it or write it. You needed to be able to read the style guide, edit, and not produce things that were going to in any way upset the licensing holder, because they were, it was product and unashamedly product, and that So my various interests at that point began to come together. My interest in writing, obviously, my interest in comics came together at the same point. I rapidly got a grasp of how to handle a license, that is to say, being given something created by somebody else and make something sensible out of it. And so that's what I did. I was an editor for a long time, several years, and I started freelance writing in my spare time because that was the thing I was keen on, and we got a chance to do it. And eventually I realized that the writing was the thing I really liked, and I quit the day job and became a writer full time. By that stage, I started working for Marvel US and then DC Comics, and then after that, 2000 AD as well, and I worked for Valiant, Dark Horse, whoever, all. And a lot of that, even things like when you're writing for the Marvel Universe, when you're writing Guardians of the Galaxy, it's still technically speaking a license you're working for. It's proprietorially owned by the company. Mm-hmm. And I think I just had a knack for looking at something and either going, I can write something that fits into the specific allowance of what that thing can and cannot do without breaking the toys, or I can reinvent it for them if they give me permission to do it. And that really became the cornerstone of what I did. So for quite a lot of years, I was a comic book writer. That was essentially what I did. And I had dreams of writing prose just because I was interested in doing that. But I still love writing comics. And this would have been the late 90s, mid to late 90s, when the Black Library was being formed by Games Workshop as a publishing wing for their games. I was contacted. I'd written a few issues of Conan for Marvel, and they were looking for talent. And they said, "We hear you've." Somebody said, "Oh, Dan's written some sword and sorcery." Not that really describes Warhammer, but nevertheless, he's written some sword and sorcery. He's written Conan. You might want to ask him. And I went in, and I was interested, and I kind of auditioned. And the key thing was you didn't need to know the lore particularly. You just needed to get the atmosphere right. If you could capture the atmosphere, they could correct all the other details. And that buys back into my misspent youth of being a role-playing gamer, is that obviously being a role-playing gamer in the UK, I had bought the Games Workshop editions of just about everything, and also I'd read White Dwarf every month, and when it was still an ecumenical magazine that covered every game.
Yeah.
So I was used to the house style, the type of illustrations, the feel of that, and certainly the sort of proto-feel that led to Road Trader and Warhammer. So I got the atmosphere pretty rapidly. And at that point, they commissioned me to write comic books and short stories, and then for the first time novels. And I've been doing that ever since. So essentially now, since then, my day job has been spent. I sometimes literally I'll write novels in the morning and chapter of a novel in the morning, then write a comic in the afternoon, and the following day I'll write a game, and then cycle through these things. So I've got multiple plates spinning at any one time, and that's essentially how I got into it. But it was a weird. It was a weird consequence of the things that I'd done as a kid without even... These are things I did because I liked them, not because I thought one day I'll get a job doing that. In fact, when I left a prestigious university with a prestigious degree in English, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, and a friend of mine said at the time, you should get a job in comics. And now I was, 21 years old at that point. I'd been reading comics for 10, 15 years. And I remember saying... Can you do that? It never occurred to me, even though I knew the names of creators and I read comics, it never occurred to me that there was an industry which you could enter into. So it's sort of, like I said, it was this case of sort of accidentally falling into things and going, wait a minute, this is really cool. I didn't know you could do this. Let's do some more of it. Which makes me sound like an idiot, but there you go.
So, when...
We should say before we go, Ricky isn't ignoring... as Dan knows, Ricky is ignoring everybody. He's not bored with Dan's story. He's currently painting Gaunt's Ghosts set as part of this. So if Ricky looks bored, don't get angry.
I'm not. I'm extremely frustrated. Simon, our other director and owner of the Gamers Emporium, kindly donated a box for me to paint because he thought it'd be a good idea as a way to plug Gaunt's Ghosts.
And he knew if I painted it, it wouldn't get painted till later.
So thank you to the Gamers Emporium. But I was going to say, it's funny that you say that. When we started the con, I came from a comic side, and me and Adam are co-writers of an independent comic, and we came from it very much so from a comic side of house. And when I started getting into the gaming side of it and wanting to know about the lore, I saw your name on books and went, I know that name from comics. They are the ones I'm going to pick up.
Well, that's great, and it was interesting because I find it very interesting that because for the first 10 or 15 years of my career, I would find that various people recognised my name, but they wouldn't all recognise it for the same reason. So there were people who knew my name from, say, Marvel, and there were people who knew my name from 2000 AD, and there were people who knew my name from, say, Warhammer. And virtually none of them had that kind of cross-pollination that they liked all of those things. And in fact, many of them thought there were several Dan Abnetts who happened to be... and they were often amazed when I said, "No, that's me. That's all me doing that thing." And one of the great things over the last decade or so, I've noticed, and I don't know if it's something to do with the rise of popularity and acceptability of the genres that we like as a hobby, but there is now a cross-pollination. 40k fans who've also incorporated Marvel because they like it too. Or 2000 AD fans who also like. Do you know what I mean? It's. They
Don't
used to
be
be
modest.
very much.
It's clearly all of you. It's just
Clearly it's just me. Yeah. No, I honestly, I used to be at conventions and I would be chatting to people and I'd have to sort of, it'd be like the United Nations where I could have to use 2000 AD language to talk to the 2000 AD guy and Warhammer language and then translate between them and nowadays people come in and they're much more sort of rounded and versed in everything. They know a little bit about everything, and I think that's because there is this wonderful proliferation of stuff where you don't have to be quite so focused on that one thing that you do. As indeed I didn't. I mean, I have worked on projects over the last little while that I sort of didn't know anything about until I went into it, and then it was like, oh, this is really exciting, and it's actually very much like that other thing that I really do like. You know, why didn't I know about this? So I find that very rewarding.
It's no, you're right. I think I mean I came into this. I mean, I was Ricky and Simon already set up the group by the time I joined, and we put the comics stuff aside, and then we just focused on the convention. But I came into this more of a comic book / gamer, just like Ricky to begin with. I still am, but I do appreciate that you're right. You know, we chat to the people in our local store, and you get people who know different levels of different things, like myself. And it is nice that there is that, as you said, cross-pollination that you probably wouldn't have gotten before.
No, like early on, I remember getting in trouble for accidentally calling a Space Marine a stormtrooper.
Regularly.
Yeah.
Regularly.
I every now and then, everyone, with the best will in the world, you do that. I find that the one mistake I often make when I'm moving between these universes that I work in is that I forget what the local made-up swear words are.
All right.
So I've sort of coined some really cool ones in Gaunt's Ghost and some other ones in Sinister Dexter and stuff like that. And every once in a while I get them the wrong way around and I go, oh, no, caught that at the typo stage and correct it in proofing. But yeah, it's you get the terminology wrong.
We've got an early question actually from Simon, from our co-director. What is his favorite? This is a good question as well. Thanks, Simon. What is your favorite character to have killed off?
Wow. The list is so extensive. I have a reputation for killing people off, particularly in the Warhammer stuff, because they are war stories. Generally speaking, they are, you know, and death has a part to play in those things to give it some degree of authenticity. There have been characters that I have been. I have killed many characters. I am notorious for killing characters, particularly in the Gaunt's Ghost series.
Either George R. Martin of the
yes, he's not really trying as far as I'm concerned. And some of them I have done it deliberately. Some of them have been casualties of the way the plot has worked, and I've gone, oh god, that character's got to die now. That's what a shame. Some I have mourned hugely, where I've been very sad that I've had to kill a character off. Some of them I've relished. Some of them have been complete surprises. There have been a couple of characters who died that I was. Until I wrote the line in which they died, I didn't realise they were up for the job, and I realised that, you know, that some subliminal writer part of me went, "Oh gosh, that's going to happen now." I think I have to say the obvious answer to that question, which is, and this is spoiler alert for those of you who haven't read it, but in the let me think, fourth volume of the Gaunt's Ghost series, I thought it was about time that one of the central casts died rather than the peripheral red shirts who I was bumping up all the time. And I killed a character there. I think he's probably one of the figures that you're painting there.
Put extra blood on him.
Yeah, and I did it, and he was sort of the least deserving of the fate as well. And this was a long time ago. This would have been about 2000, 2001, I would imagine. So this is a long time ago. And I did it to show that no one was safe in the series, and that the series was a serious story that people had to pay attention to. Otherwise, things would happen, and they would be shocked by it. And that makes it sound very calculating. It was also part of the story. It was meant to be this immensely tragic moment, and it was. And testament to how important that is. 20 years later, that is still the most commonly asked question, which is, why did you kill that character? Like, people still ask me why I killed that character. I've been threatened with physical violence for doing it at a convention. Somebody lost it completely when confronted with that piece of information. But weirdly, not that I would welcome that kind of reception anywhere, but I sort of took that as an immense compliment, because the reason that 20 years later people are still asking me the questions, people still care, and people are still upset about it, is sort of a massive compliment to the story that hooked them in so much that a completely invented persona affected them in that way. And since then, other notable events in that series and in things like the Eisenhorn books and the Horus Heresy stories, that I have people come up to me and I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you did that. But also, and sadly, we're not getting to physically go to conventions the way we used to, but I always carry around with me a notebook wherever I go. And it got to the point where at conventions, people would come up, and if they would volunteer their names to be killed off in my books. So I needed a list of cannon fodder, and people would just come in and scribble in the book and say, you could use my name if you need it. Yeah, great. So I'm slowly sort of bumping these names off in the battles of the 40k universe. And because I'm now working on part of the team that's engaged very deeply on the last few novels of the massive Horus Heresy cycle, Siege of Terror, I think that me and my cohorts in that are going to now be killing off some characters that are pretty amazingly huge, because that is part of the mythology, and we're the people who get to do that. So that's a sort of a weird honour, I suppose, to get to be the people who do that.
Dubious honour.
Dubious honour, but yeah.
Especially when one of them has been killed multiple times by now, I think.
Oh yes, there's all sorts of things that yes, it's a matter of with that, it's a matter of trying to stick the landing and make it feel like it was all a worthwhile journey. But it's and we have a feline visitor. There we go.
She does this quite often. I do invite it. She's now sitting on my questions that I've been writing down. We thank you for the questions so far. I have been noting them down.
We've got message from Chinook666.
Hello, Simon.
Yeah, it's someone we know called Simon. We're not worthy to Mr. Abnett. Massive fan of his works with Ian Culbard. Brink is fantastic in 2000 AD. Question, any plans to revive Dark Ages story that you and Ian did for Dark Horse?
Oh, interesting question. We'd love to. I don't know if we get to do that, but Ian and I do work on a number of things. We enjoy working together. I suppose I've probably got to that point in my career where I have, instead of just taking the artist that I'm assigned to, which is what it's like a lot of the time, there are certain artists that I work with on a regular basis. So in 2000 AD, for instance, Mark Harrison on Grey Area and The Out. I love working with Mark. In the Joe Shred magazine, Phil Winslade on Lawless. That is we just the guys who do that. Richard Elson on Kingdom and Feral and Foe. These are relationships that are built up over time. So that it's a play. I know how much to do to know what they're doing, and they have a collaborative. Yep. We chat about the stories. I write things that they're going to want to draw, and it goes back and forth like that. And Ian is definitely one of those. We started out on New Dead Guardians for Vertigo, and then did Dark Ages, and then Wild's End for Boom. Which, if you've never read Wild's End, I can recommend. It's kind of the War of the Worlds meets The Wind in the Willows. It's anthropomorphic Arthur Ranson horror, which is very weird. But great. It's about an alien invasion in this kind of turn of the century England, but all the main characters are like animals that are humanized animals, like out of Rupert Bear, which works oddly well. But yes, we then did. We both worked for 2000 AD, but we hadn't worked together in 2000 AD, and we thought we should do a 2000 AD strip. So we pitched Brink to them, which is a police procedural set in the comparatively near future on at a time when the Earth has clearly, although we don't say what, the Earth has become uninhabitable, and everybody, the human race, is living in space stations in the solar system. On it's called the brink. They're living on the brink. So it's a sort of claustrophobic ecological drama. We lighten it. The tagline would be kind of True Detective meets Outland, where they're solving a murder case, and there are distinct hints of strange cosmic horror in the background, and this kind of stuff. And we didn't think 2000 AD would take it because it was very talky. It was not the usual sort of action-packed format for 2000 AD. But Matt took a chance on it. That's Tharg took a chance on it, and it was really well received. And we're now working on book 5, series 5, and they're long series, and it's we try and do it like almost like a TV show, in as much as the dialogue is very naturalistic. We don't have comic book conventions of the way dialogue works. Like, for instance, I don't say, well, Adam, in order to get your name in the balloon. None of that. It's all done in a much more TV scripted way. And they recently did. It was one of the strips chosen for the Penguin. Did some amazing audio drama adaptations. They did a couple of Dread stories. They did Halo Jones, all of which are terrifically worth listening to. And to our honour, they picked book 1 of Brink to be the other one. So we were up there with Halo Jones and Dread as being something they picked. And we had Nina Sosanya playing the lead role, and it's great. With David Warner and Richard Armitage and all sorts of people in it. I recommend you go and listen to it because it's terrific. I don't care what the story's like. It's just a great piece of drama. They've done a brilliant job of it. So yeah, he and I really work well, and he and I talk on a regular basis and have really odd conversations. So just literally today, I just written in the latest episode of the book 5 of Brink that we're working on, and there are a number of. We've got to the stage now where the story's become complicated enough for there to be deliberate callbacks to things that we've seen before. So I wrote in this script, 5-page script, where I was citing chapter and verse. What we should see now is the thing we saw back in, I don't know, book 3, chapter 4, page 2, panel 3, so that we could get these visual callbacks so that the audience would understand that we were referencing things that had happened. And the nature of the collaboration is that I've been really specific about it, and I got it absolutely spot on. But he rang me this morning and he said, yes, but after the last time we saw that, we know that something else happened and therefore it would have changed slightly. And he, thinking visually, because obviously he's the artist, had realised there was one other extra bit he needed to put into it to make it continuity perfect. And that to me, and I would never have caught that. And that's to me the great nature of a writer-artist relationship, where they can, when they come to visualize it, they go, oh, shit, no, actually, it's this, because since we saw that, that's fallen over, and that would be smeared, and So the weird conversations. At some point, not that they are interesting, but some of the conversations that you can have with co-creators should be taped and played, just to hear grown people talk nonsense about the most specific detail for hours, and you go, why are you? But it matters. It really matters because you want to get it right.
Me and Ricky know that all too well. I always say we are arguing the same. Apologies, the cat is trying to get my attention. I'm completely engrossed. Me and Ricky, when we discuss stuff, we always argue in the same direction. It's you're reasoning things out, hearing a sounding board at the same time. Yeah. And as you said, you just talk about nonsense. Well, of course he'd say that. No, he wouldn't say that, would he? No, we wrote this big long. Well, Ricky wrote this big long exposition-filled explanation for a character, try and explain who he was, and we couldn't hear it in our heads. It didn't sound right, and we just went, well, what would he sound like then? And we realized we were talking about Richard Ayoade, and we imagined him saying hello, and that was it. That's all you needed. Just got rid of everything else, and it was Richard Ayoade, and we're like, that's what he'd sound like. That's what it was, and then it all flowed from there. Then, but totally get that. We've got a couple other questions actually to throw up, since my cat's sitting on the questions and I can't see them. Fiaboski is asking, what's your favorite piece that you've written? It's quite a broad question there, but...
Again, that's quite difficult. Quite often my favorite thing is the thing I've just written, because it is the freshest and I'm most connected to it, particularly with novels. When you spend minimum 3, often 7 or 8 months working on something on a daily basis, you develop an enormous connection to it, so that it's almost weird when you stop and you've finished and you've got to let go of it. So I often go back and say my latest book is the thing I'm most connected to. But there are things that perennially I'm incredibly proud of and feel well connected to. I think for instance, the third Gaunt's Ghost book, Necropolis, that was one of the series where I realised that I got it working, and now suddenly I had something that I really wanted to do. The first, the Eisenhorn trilogy, which again is very much a sort of gateway drug for 40k. That was another thing that I was very, very pleased with. The Horus Heresy books, and also things like Brink and Guardians of the Galaxy and other things. It's difficult for me to really single something out. I know what obsesses me at the moment is the novel that I'm writing right now and have been since January, which will be the biggest and most ambitious thing I've ever done. And I can't say much more than that, except if you know anything about anything, you will have worked out what that has to have some connection to. But yeah, you just get even though it's sort of completely made up. We mockingly, for instance, in the Black Library, when the authors gather together, we mockingly refer to what we do as shooty death kill in space. We don't take seriously that there's no sense of oh gosh, we're writing literature, but nevertheless we take it very seriously. It's like we were saying just now about plotting that. You take it very, very seriously, and I know the impact it's had on readers around the world for 20 years. Not just my work, but the work of other people there. The difference that it can make, and the way it can matter so much. So I think you have a responsibility to make it. I'd like to better than it needs to be. Is that a fair way of putting it? It's like I could write some tie-in piece of fun that has Space Marines in it and get paid, and that's it. But I never treat it like that. I always put as much into it as I possibly can and go, I want this to be rewarding, with a good story, great characters, maybe background detail, maybe even things that I've put in that no one's ever going to get or pick up on, but I know they're there, just to feel satisfied about that, just a sense that that there is a sort of a richness, maybe even a richness that people go. I know again, people reread the books. The ones they like, they go back and reread. And I'd like there to be things that they only notice the second or third time. They go, oh, wait a minute. That's the villain in the Ravenor trilogy, for instance, that follows the Eisenhorn trilogy. The main villain there, the identity of the main villain there is given away in the notes at the back of the Eisenhorn trilogy several years before, and nobody noticed that it was there, except one guy who came up to me at a convention and said, did you do that deliberately? I went, yeah. You're the only person he ended up with a book dedicated to, because he was the first one to pick up on that. Just stuff. So the more you look, it's there, and I like that. I say, along with getting so upset they want to punch me, because that's actually a huge compliment. Being told that I like, people. This has happened to me a lot. People come up to me and said, I really enjoyed whatever the book is. It was so much better than it needed to be. And I just think, great, I did my job properly then. So yeah. So that's I've kind of fudged that answer, but I think it's as good as you're going to get from me.
That's understandable. No, I know what you mean. I think we all know as readers and fans and writers, I guess, whether it be professional fans, it's always you're always making yourself, you're always improving yourself, usually.
Oh yeah, yes.
But no, right. I mean, saying it's well about like you can't take it too seriously. Me and Ricky have most of the stuff we write. I mean, you might see the guys that we actually created ourselves in the comics as a joke. It wasn't narcissism or anything like that. It was just a misspelling of my surname when we were credited for something online once, and so we put ourselves as idiots. But they're the guys that know everything, but they don't care. They're beyond that, and they're just stupid, and they like video games. They're us, and we will pain ourselves over a stupid side gag and how to pace it in 4 panels, and then it'll just be throwaway,
Yeah.
Or we'll put a little clip note at the bottom of something saying, don't forget to do this, and it'll be nothing. It'll just be a gag later on that we think is hilarious.
Or a callback.
A callback, that sort of stuff. If you as a creator are bothered enough and engaged enough in what you're doing to spend the time to put in those kind of little finessing touches, details that you're not even sure that people are going to pick up on, then, like I said, I think that's one of the places that you think you can be fairly confident that what you're giving out is something that people will quite enjoy. I wrote one of the Horus Heresy novels, Prospero Burns. It's the story of the Space Wolves attack. Well, it's not actually. It's meant to be the story of the Space Wolves attacking the Thousand Suns on Prospero, but I took a sort of roundabout route to it, and it's more about who the Space Wolves are and why they do it rather than the attack itself. And it's possibly my most divisive book because it's a proper Marmite book. So 40k fans either love it and think it's the best thing they've ever read, or they despise it with the hatred of a burning sun. They just, because it's not what it said it was going to be on the outside of the book, and they absolutely hate it. They say it's like sort of digressive and goes off the point. But the people who love it, boy, do they love it! And the reason they love it is because they get the things that I was doing there. I know of one person who essentially, literally wrote a thesis on the mythology that is layered into the backstory of the Space Wolves and this kind of stuff. And so I honestly don't care if I'm not sitting there going, I want everybody to love it. I just want some people to properly love it, and then other people, because I think if I made something that everybody in the world went, that's fantastic, I'd go, I'm quite worried because they must have done something that was sort of university bland. You know what I mean? That it was acceptable to all people. I'd rather it provoke a reaction, even if it's a strong negative one. Yeah, and that's putting those details.
We have got a question related to like that kind of area of the thing. El Asthmatic has asked, did Magnus do anything wrong? Magnus did everything wrong. I'm trying to hesitate from swearing. Yes, Magnus has had a free fucking pass for too long. He early on, his mistakes and his overambition could have been seen as sort of was sort of excusable. But he just compounds it as he goes along, to the point where his ego just won't let go. And so by the end, it's a definite case of he was wrong. He was completely wrong. That is not to vindicate the other parties involved. I'm not saying that by saying Magnus was very wrong, I'm not also at the same time saying, and of course, therefore, the Emperor was right. That's a different thing altogether. But this kind of this defense of Magnus thing, I think, has got to stop, because he clearly was, a menace, a menace who should have been stopped long since.
There we go. But I think that's a credit to the writing that the Warhammer lore is so complex and so layered that nobody's right.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody's right, and nobody really is wrong. I think that's the other thing. I mean, it's a very bleak universe.
Just as you say that, somebody else says Lehman was not wrong. He did nothing wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and even if he did, would you dare tell him? But yeah, the universe, it's a very bleak universe, and even the most principled and heroic figures in it, like Rogel Dawn and Gilliman, are fairly dark in terms of their sort of warlord status of crushing everything under a steel boot. But I think it will become cartoonish if the worst of those characters was so pantomime evil that there was nothing in there. So you can take in the Siege of Terror and the Horus Heresy characters who are unmistakably evil, like Horus, like Perturabo, like Angron, and still feel a degree of sympathy for them, and Magnus as well. Still see I hope a gradation of things that this is bad about them and this is bad about them, but this is interesting about them, and this is sad, and this is regrettable, and you know what I mean. In the same way that very few of the heroes you can go, yes, good. These are heroes, us being a very good example, who are got some baggage. Let's put it that way. Got some baggage of their own. So I think that's one of the things I've always liked about the Warhammer universe is that nothing is.
Oh, we lost Dan.
Bear with us for a second. Bear with us. Nothing is. Oh. Give us just a second. We'll jump back in now.
So,
Oh yeah, hello.
Hello there.
Hello.
Hello. We've only got your voice now.
I'm coming back in.
There we go.
Cool.
There we go.
I don't know. Everything dropped out suddenly. I don't know why that was.
And someone's sharing their screen now. Bear with me.
I think it might.
Oh, Dan, you're sharing your screen. So next to your camera button, the one there says that if you... There you go.
Here we go. Cool. Sorry about that.
That's fine. If it was me doing this, if I'd hit a button, it'd been sent somewhere else completely.
But it's okay. I'm running the stream. We don't let Adam touch things like running the stream.
Adam breaks things. Adam is like bad, really, really bad. Adam's beyond technophobic sometimes. Technology fears him. No, that's fine. We got you just. I forgot what you were saying then.
I think I was saying that I think the universe is interesting because everything is interestingly shaded and nothing is, as it were, black and white. And I think you would be, as you said, it'd be cartoony, it'd be pantomime if you had just the moustache twirling, and also there's compliment about our beards here as well. Paula Knight says, "Sweet Jesus, perfection is it the perfection of evolution of beards?"
So I guess I'm patchy.
I've had so many lockdown beards since, but I don't know about you. There's a point where my beard's like fiberglass. My hair isn't.
Yeah. No, I know.
My beard's like fiberglass. Yeah.
I've had a beard for a long time, but it got longer and longer and longer, and then it got longer during lockdown. And I think there's been 2 points during the course of lockdown and the pandemic where I've just gone. When I hit the clippers, it's all coming off because I need to. It's like I need a forest fire to start over, new growth, and just gone back to the basics because there comes a point where no matter how much you do the upkeep and the topiary, you go, no, I've lost control. I've lost control of my beard.
You wake up with a strangling in the middle of the night.
And yes, yeah. That's
coffee
horrible.
Pasty.
So the hair is a lockdown thing.
So is this.
Yeah.
But the beard is more like. Normally, it would have been... I'm normally clean-shaven-ish. But since we've been doing a lot more Twitch, even though it's patchy, it hides the double chin a bit.
Oh, yeah, no. This is going on.
I would happily... I tell people this. I'm not vain about... I've been going bald since I was a teenager. I would happily give up all my hair if I could have a little Tintin. Just there.
Okay. Yeah. There's something cool about that, and there isn't about an old man hair. You know, the bit that just goes around the air. Yeah. That was the point. When I receded enough where it was beginning to get that, I just went right from that point on. It's just like completely shaved, completely all the time.
Word of advice to everybody, but Dan, who's probably more common sense than me: don't grow a little ponytail on the top of your head when you go bald. Because that stuff never heals. The skin just does not like it after it's gone.
And you get bothered by Hare Krishnas.
Get bothered by Hare Krishnas.
Oh, yeah.
I had one. My hair was about that long, this giant ponytail, and they were like, "Which temple do you go to?" And I'm like, "Oh no, thank you." No. And then I'd go to some of their places because I'm vegan and I have like their samosas and stuff. They always make really nice food. And they go, "Do you come here often?" I was like, "Yeah, but only for the food." So, I mean, I really dig you guys and everything, but just mainly for your samosas and your mango juice. Genuinely true.
Should we get back onto?
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question about your process. Say, for example, your different processes, I guess, for how you might write a comic book or a novel. How do you go about from scratch to finish?
In all sorts of different ways. Obviously, writing prose is very different to writing a comic script because for those people who don't know, a comic script is literally like a movie screenplay where I am also writing descriptive panel descriptions for what the artist is going to draw, as well as the text and dialogue that will actually feature in the finished comic. So in other words, half of what I'm doing is invisible and will never be read by the public because it will be rendered by the artist. I say that some people don't realise that's how comics work. Obviously, in prose, everything I write essentially is going to be forward-facing and read by somebody in the end of it. So I like prose because it's to me it feels like I'm closer to the reader, because what I write here is pretty much literally what you read at the other end. Whereas what I write in a comic goes through the filter of an artist and a team and colorist and letterer to get to you. Not to say one is better than the other; they have different things going on. But it's very interesting. I've got I suppose it's just sheer experience. I know I'm prolific, and I believe I'm in the top 20 all-time comic book writers in terms of my output, which is terrifying to know that. But so I sort of got a sort of innate judgment about things, about how long to be. What I'm trying to say is my process in comics has changed over the years. I used to literally start at the beginning, page 1, write page 1 and write page 2, panel descriptions and everything like that. And then I realised that actually sometimes you'd end up being a page long or out of whack, and there was lots of change. So I found ways of sketching it out where I just sort of map out the thing, and then I break that into pages. Then I break the pages into panels, and then I put panel descriptions in, etc., etc. And after it was probably about 10 years or so ago, I don't know what happened. I was working one day, and it suddenly occurred to me the completely weird idea of doing it backwards might be. I'll explain what I mean. I don't mean literally from the last page back to the first page, but doing it backwards. So basically, dialogue is usually the last thing that's added. It's either the last thing that's added to the script when you're finessing the dialogue, or it's the thing that you add after the art has been drawn if you're working in the Marvel method.
Yeah.
Working Marvel method, you write a description, the artist draws it, and then the writer comes back in and dialogues according to the pages. That dialoguing, that lettering pass is something I still do no matter what, because you never quite know what you're going to get, and there's always a way of tweaking or improving a few lines in every issue just to make it mesh with the art better. A really good expression, you realise the line you wrote for it could be better, because it would, I always do a lettering pass. But the dialogue is sort of considered to be the icing on the cake, the bit that you put on last, and all the structures in place. About 10 years ago, writing full script, I went, actually, although my overall responsibility is the story structure as writer, my ultimate responsibility is the quality of the dialogue, and quite often it's the way the characters speak to each other that will carry the story. And will determine how long or short, or how fast or slow a story is, depending on what characters are doing, what they're saying, what. So I experimented, and I started to write comics by just simply writing the dialogue like a script, without any panel descriptions, or even breaking it into panels or pages. I would just come in and write dialogue, write captions. So I had a long document that was just this, and then I would go back and break it into pages. Then I'd break the pages into panels, and then I'd go in and write the panel descriptions. I literally built the comic backwards. And I think my comic book writing improved exponentially when I started doing that. Because I started with the bit that needed the finest tuning, and I got the pacing right. So the sorts of places where I would be sort of floundering around trying to work out whether I was being too fast or too slow in a beat of a story, I could see it literally because I had the dialogue in front of me. I go, right, I need 2 panels for that line to land, and then I need this, and it all worked beautifully. And I've got weirdly so good at it. That's a odd way of putting it, but that's become so second nature to me. I now do it. I just do that. Any strip, 2008 DC Marvel, I write the dialogue first, and then I take the dialogue and use that as the skeletal frame to plot out the pace of the story. Now I break it down. I don't know if other artists have ever done that or do that on a regular basis. But the weird thing is that it's really rare for me these days to either come up short or have too much. For instance, on a 22-page issue, I'll write the dialogue down. I go, that's the story, great. And I'll work through it, expecting at some point to have to cut a little bit in order to make it fit into 22 pages, or maybe add a little bit in to make sure it lasts 22 pages. And almost invariably, it's exactly the right length. The same with 5 pages. It's like I know intuitively how much I need to do to make the story, no matter what the story's doing. So that process is fast, and it's fast for me. I, as a result of that, I can write very, very quickly, sort of terrifyingly quickly, and I like that. I feel it's a very visual process when I'm doing comics, because although I expect the artist to completely overrule me if they could see a better way of doing it, I will put in quite specific panel descriptions in terms of just the way I see it. in the hope that maybe they look at it and go, "Oh God, yeah, that's a great way of looking at that." So I put those sort of descriptions. My working process, generally speaking, as I said to you earlier, is I like to break the day up into chunks. I find that I work in all these different universes and I love them all, but you could very easily get sick to the back teeth of any one of them if you spent too long there. Particularly things like 40k, where it's relentlessly operatic and huge. So even though I love it, after a while you sort of run out of adjectives. You need to go and recharge the batteries. So I will, like I said, I will often get up in the morning. I rise quite early. I'll write a couple of thousand words, maybe a chapter or something like that, get the day started, and that's a good under my belt. And then I'll go away and either spend the rest of the day working on an issue of an American comic, or I'll do an episode of 2000 AD or something like that, or something. So I'll break it up. So I never stay anywhere long enough to kind of become kicked off with it. So every time there is an urgent sense of excitement that I'm returning and getting to do some more. And that, I think, has stood me in very good stead. I know quite a lot of writers, and indeed artists, who specialise in one thing, and they do it superbly well, probably better than I could. But I know that they have a higher burnout rate. They get to the point where they absolutely cannot stand what they're doing, and they need to go and they need to have a break. And I think my breaks are not me storming off in a huff and not doing anything. They're just me doing something else, which explains how prolific I am. I just go, I'm tired of 40k today, I'll write for 2000 AD. Oh, I'm tired of... And obviously, that is juggled to meet my deadline requirements and what's being asked of me. But I honestly think it was something that I stumbled upon, again, quite a long time ago, and realised that's how you kept it fresh, that I can get excited about things more if I don't linger. And then I can get excited about going back to it because I'm enthused about going back to where it is. And every now and then, those rules fall apart completely. So last week was a really good example. I'm writing this big novel. I spent a day on it. I was really enjoying it, but I think I've reached the burnout level of that. Tomorrow morning, I'll get up and I'll do something deliberately different to freshen it up. And I did. And I got up and it was first thing in the morning, and I thought, I'll start by doing sensibly is sort of just to save and record where I was with the novel. I'll just read back the last little bit. I've written a few notes on Post-it notes and bits and pieces like that. So I'll just put those into my note file. So they're all fresh. So basically, I've organised where I was leaving off. So when I go back to these and open these files again, I can pick up immediately without wondering, what does that scrawl there mean? It's a terrible thing. Keep notes as you go along, but quite often the handwriting's so bad that unless you transcribe it, you go, I might as well have not noted that down. So anyway, I was doing that first thing in the morning. It was on Friday, actually. And clearly my brain had already gone, we're doing something else today. And it had gone off already. It was already thinking about the job that I was intending to do. And so my subconscious kicked in. Just the mechanical process of taking these notes. Suddenly, all these subliminal connections were coming together on the book that I didn't think I was going to be writing that day. And I realised that I had thought of things I hadn't thought of before. I'd made connections to the plot that took what I thought was a good plot and made it even better. And I was so excited, and I was so determined not to lose that. I started to make notes, and I thought, sod it, I'm just going to write it. So again, I ditched my revised plan. I went straight back into the novel and had an incredibly productive day, making the alterations whilst they were fresh. But that adaptability of saying, no, I'll do this now whilst it's ready to go, and you get the best out of it. So shop and change, but be prepared. I'm always prepared for the fact that sometimes something will overtake you. You'll be filled by some muse of fire. I don't know, and then you just that's a whole day or 2 or 3 days gone. Something because that was the right moment to do that. It was the right moment to get that out of your system and onto paper.
Otherwise, you're still in the same routine anyway, aren't you? You're still forcing yourself to do the same thing, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, and I'll say that the only thing that moderates that is my awareness of deadlines. That I make sure that obviously I don't want to miss deadlines and let editors down or leave artists without scripts when they could be drawing. So I do always keep a weather eye on that and make sure I'm not doing that kind of stuff. Wherever possible, as a flexibility. Whereas I go to bed tonight, for instance, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing tomorrow. But tomorrow morning, if that isn't happening, but something else is, I know I've still got a day on a deadline where I could switch around and do something else instead to capitalise on the enthusiasm. I think it's a very rare thing. I think writers and artists in comics and elsewhere, and other creatives as well, I'm sure, it's a solitary occupation. You spend most of your time alone in a at a computer or a keyboard or at an easel or whatever it is, trying to express yourself in words or images or music or whatever. And the feedback you get from that is amazing, but often quite delayed. You know, if I write a novel now, it might be 14, 15 months before anybody gets to read it in public and it tells me whether it was any good or not. So it's a weird detachment from what is actually a very intimate connection with an audience. It's a perennial problem of creatives, I think, sort of going stir crazy or getting cabin fever or just losing the will to do it or losing their confidence. Every industry has that, but you see it so often in comics where you know, people just sort of they don't have a breakdown, but they just go, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. You know, I've been doing this for 4 months now, and I don't even know if it's any good anymore, and they walk away from it. So I think one of the things, this sort of a mental hygiene thing that maybe I've organically developed over the years, is to take those opportunities, to recognise those opportunities. I am just not in the mood to do thing X today, so I'm going to do thing Y instead. And that way I'll get to the end of the day with the satisfaction of knowing I've done something, because that's preferable to get to the end of the day and going, I didn't get thing X done.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't get anything done at all. So you actually sort of placate. You get it all done. You just don't necessarily get it done in the way. So you can't see it from where you're sitting, but I have clipboards on my wall here with all sorts of schedules and deadline lists and lists of things to do. So I always update them because I'll always forget stuff. Even on my desk, I've got Post-it notes on the go with lists of things to do. And I update them as I go along, and I revise them every week and make sure I'm on top of everything. You know, it's like planning some military campaign about what's the next thing, or this is now entered the priority. This is on priority week, and this can fall back now because that's dealt with, all this kind of stuff. So I have that to observe all the deadline stuff. At the same time, I know where the flexibility is so that I can have that stuff to keep me creative. Oh, that was a very long-winded answer. I'm sorry for that.
It's an absolutely interesting answer, and we can. I'm sure people who listen as well, we certainly can relate. Ricky had we had a whiteboard that he'd taken for free, like legally, not illegally, legally from one of the offices he worked at, and it was just X stock, and we had a living, breathing wall of ideas that would chop and change as we went around. And no, I totally get that. It's and as you said, it's a way of keeping things fresh and making sure that you're not sick and tired of things. Sometimes you're right. If you're working on one thing, that's all you've got, and you've got to stop and start and try and find inspiration. I guess with the amount of universes you've got your hands in.
And you also I think, I mean, it sounds really stupid, but very simple things like making notes in the notebook as you go, just jotting ideas down as you have them. They seem like the sort of real ideas that you just won't forget because they're not important enough to forget, and that's why you're going to forget them. Writing them down saves you the burden of having to remember those things. So just in the last day, I've written down 4 adjectives because I liked them. They weren't new to me. I just went, they're good words. I just wrote them down so they were there next time. And similarly, I make lists of, weekly lists, monthly lists, general lists, pending lists, and that kind of stuff, which I also constantly update, simply so that I don't have to hold it in my head. The act of rewriting them every now and then to update them reminds me of what's a priority. And again, it saves the bit so that all the mental energy gets going into the plot. And that's the other thing about writing, and this applies to comics, and it certainly applies to prose work like novels, is I plan enough to get myself approved so I can write the book, so I can write an outline and get it approved. Yeah. But I build in a lot of redundancy and flexibility because, as far as I'm concerned, all the great ideas I can have on that one day I sit down to write the pitch for the novel to get the commission to write it, they do not represent all the great ideas I will have in the, let's say, 6 months it takes me to write that novel. So you can't expect them all to happen on the same day. It's not, I've got all these great ideas, I will now spend 6 months executing them. But you should be receptive to the ebb and flow of things, and that there's going to come a point, with any luck, if you're really into the book, there's going to come at least one point in that 6 month period where something just goes ping, and you go, oh, wait a minute, that's a much better way of doing this. And you do that. The most recent Gaunt book is a great example of that. I had been planning that storyline that I delivered in Anarch, which was out actually the year before last or last year. That storyline has actually been building up for about 7 years through various books. There's all sorts of long-term payoffs happening there in that story. And so it was fairly carefully plotted out. I had notes. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. This will be the fate of this character. This will be the fate of this character. These are the things that I'd set up, and I'd made notes carefully, so I knew where things were going to go. I was 3.5, 4 months into that novel. It was going really, 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 really well. I got up in the morning. I thought, right, do some more of the novels this morning. I was literally standing in the shower, first thing in the morning. You know, and I don't know where this idea came from somewhere, where I suddenly realised I could do, instead of doing this one thing that I was going to do, I could do it twice. And I went, did I do it twice? But no one would see it happening twice. People might have guessed that it might happen once, but no one will see it happening twice. That would be tremendously shocking. And I admit, I sort of literally leapt out of the shower and sort of dried myself down and got a towel around me. And went downstairs and started to sort of stress test the idea to see if I had contradicted myself anywhere in the books running up to that, which meant that I couldn't do it. And after about an hour sitting there in a towel, I realised that I could do it. And because it was fresh and it had happened then, it excited me. So that the sort of climactic moments of that book have a really good element that people have said they loved. One of the reasons they loved it, I think, is because it was alive when it went in. It hadn't been caught and then salted and left in a storage jar for 3 years until I got to the point of using it. I wasn't using pickled ingredients. This was raw, and it had gone straight in. And my excitement for it was visible in the urgency with which it was delivered into the story. And that happens in any story. If it's an alive, flexible thing until you finally write the last word. I'm discovering that with the novel I'm writing at the moment. I've got pretty much know, not only do I know where it's going, I know there are certain big beats that I've got to hit because they're canon. And even so, every now and then I'm going, oh, wait a minute, I could, oh my God, that, and and that's when you know that it's exciting because it has this sense of vitality, that you're participating in something with the novel rather than just, idly putting words down on paper and seeing what happens with it. And to be a creator, to be a writer or whatever, who is receptive to that when it happens, rather than going, oh no, can't do that because I've got a plot and I'm sticking to it. To go, oh gosh, maybe that's my brain has ticked over and it's now come up with a better idea than the one I had when I originally pitched it. Still gets me to the same place. Yeah, it's worth taking this on board because it's suddenly gonna give me something that even I didn't expect, and that's the exciting thing.
Fresh from Dan Abnett's brain garden.
So I'm aware that we're coming up on the hour that we told you that we'd want you for. So
if you're happy to stay on longer, that's cool. But if you're needing to wrap up, then we'll throw.
I will have to wrap up quite soon, I'm afraid. Quite apart from anything else, I have to moderate my my hours of wakefulness. I did about 10 years ago. No, longer than that now. I discovered I was epileptic. I didn't know I was epileptic. Through my entire life, being secretly epileptic without realising it. I had the thing called nocturnal epilepsy. So I had fits in my sleep, which I thought were nightmares. And over a decade ago now, I suddenly had a series of seizures in the daytime. And this was terrifying for me and my family. I ended up in hospital, and it took them 3 months to diagnose it, and because they thought it might be a brain tumour or all sorts of that. And they finally went, oh no, Mr. Abnett, you're just epileptic. It's finally shown up in... Yeah, just epileptic. And I was so relieved. I mean, really, you seriously go through 3 months thinking, I could be dying right now. And then they tell you it's something that they can treat and it's something you can live with. So I haven't had a fit since. I have medication that's fine. But one of the things that I have to do is moderate my stopping and starting hours very carefully. So we're sounds ridiculous, but we're approaching my bedtime because I get up early. We're approaching my bedtime and I can't get overtired. But yeah.
I'll put up what I've painted into our Discord.
Please
so feel free to check out our Discord. But we got a couple of questions to wrap things up. We usually do some fun ones to end it. So I wanted to ask of all, because you tend to do a lot of like sci-fi epics in these fantasy space faring places. If you had to live in one, which one would you go for?
Oh, goodness me. Well, I can tell you I wouldn't go for the 40k universe.
Really?
Much as it is my favourite, and I've spent more time there than anywhere else, that is not a place you want to even visit accidentally on holiday.
No.
It's tricky. I honestly think, and this is going to sound so ridiculously tame, but if I had to live in an IP universe, I think I'd choose Star Trek. I could crew a starship. I could be Starfleet. I think I'd enjoy that.
What era?
Well, tricky. I think probably next gen. My favourite era is original series. I just adore the original series, but it seemed to be a lot more dangerous then. I like the carpet and comfort of the next gen spaceship. It might be quite nice to have a shirt that's torn across the middle with 3 slashes across your chest. But I would be afraid that mine would be red. Whereas in next gen, I quite like the touch communicators and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You also have to keep on fighting people like this.
Yeah. Yes.
The flying heel kick thing, scissor kick thing.
When I told Adam I was going to ask that question, I took the guess that you would have said Legion of Superheroes future.
Oh, actually, well, you see, as far as I'm concerned, that would be a close second, because I was thinking about comic book universes, and to me, the utopia of the Legion's universe is not a million miles away from Star Trek. It's sort of the Federation with capes, really.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of things in common there. So actually, yes, you were actually on the right track.
Because
there's a dalliance with things like the Star Wars universe. You're going, well, that'd be exciting. It wouldn't be for long.
No.
But I think there is weirdly it's an aspirational thing. I've also spent a lot of time, obviously, thinking about Doctor Who, which is another favourite of mine. But I don't think I'd enjoy that much.
Nothing would happen unless a TARDIS is in somewhere. Everything else would just be boring. You'd just be carrying your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, great.
I think travelling with the Doctor is ultimately a tragic and sad thing to happen to anybody.
Yes.
If
could be done wrong.
And then there are other universes that fictional universes that I adore. I adore Babylon 5 because I think it's such a well-constructed story with brilliant intrigue in it. And although, generally speaking, heresy to say so, but although generally speaking, its stories are terrible, I love Space 1999. I just adore Space 1999. Best spaceships ever. So maybe if Starfleet won't have me, Moonbase Alpha will.
I instantly went with Ian M. Banks' Culture.
Oh, Culture,
universe.
yeah.
But then as soon as you said Trek, I'd be like, oh yeah, Trek actually.
Like, when I thought of the question, and I was thinking, well, the Marvel Universe, it always comes up. And then I thought, yeah, but it comes up for the heroes. The people who live in there, like if you're one of the broccoli people that Jean Grey destroyed, not so much.
Not so much. Yes. I think that will be it. I think the question needs to be reframed. It's not so much what universe would you be in, but what would you be if you were there?
Yeah.
So, it's like I would be in the Marvel Universe, provided I could be an Avenger. Yes. I would be. I do not want to be third man on left screaming as skyscraper collapses because who wants that?
Why do I still live in New York City? My house has been rebuilt three times this week.
And then the other one I thought, I don't know, do you play any of the Warhammer games? And if you do, what army do you collect? Yes, I do. I don't play them as much as you would imagine that I would, simply because in the same way that I don't play really video games as much as a career as a video game writer would suggest that I ought to, because I would never get any work done. It's as simple as that. I would get sidetracked. I just, thanks to lockdown, really started playing pen and paper role-playing games again with family and friends. Call of Cthulhu and Dungeons and Dragons and Traveller, which is my other absolute favourite. Going to start some of that soon. But if I start getting really heavily invested in Warhammer and stuff like that, that would be quite difficult for me to maintain any kind of output of work. But I have, however, made sure I've played it on a regular basis and played every different game that Games Workshop's ever done. And that I've written about. So I understand the way the mechanics work, and I understand what it's like to play those things. So I understand not just from a lore point of view what the universe is, but from a gaming experience the universe is, and that's been very, very useful indeed. My local, got a local branch of Games Workshop here in Maidstone, who in the past has been kind enough to sort of set up demonstrations games on club night, and I go in there and they say, right, I say I want to play Titanicus, or I want to play
I don't know, Battlefleet Gothic or whatever, and they go, well, come in, we'll set up a game and we'll get some of the club members to play you and show you how it works, and that's terrific because you absolutely understand. You get to know what players are like, because not everybody who plays the game plays it in the same way. By which I mean, people derive different things from games. Some people are in it they're all about the lore mechanics. Some people are about the lore, some about the rule mechanics, some are about the role playing aspects, some are just about the miniatures. They could all be standing around the same table playing the same game and all enjoying it, but they're enjoying different things about it. And that's a great thing to observe, so that when you go away and write that novel, you're going, what can I put in there that the rules guy would appreciate me acknowledging? What can I put in there the miniatures guy would like? Just to keep being awareness that a Warhammer fan can mean a lot of different things depending on your bias and interest in terms of what you do. So I do play it, but not as much, and therefore I don't collect an army. I have, again, you can't see it because it's a fixed screen, but I have a cabinet facing me over there which is full of miniatures. So I don't collect a specific army. I collect, this is Eisenhorn and Gaunt's Ghost, and people give me painted miniatures, and every now and then I'll see a miniature or a Titan or something. I go, I like that, and that comes home with me. And I either paint it very badly, or a couple of friends of mine who are very good get commissioned to paint it for me because I haven't got the time to do it. So I haven't got an army. I've got a collection. If I did have an army, I think it would inevitably be Imperial Guard, inevitably be Astra Militarum, because they're my boys in terms of.
Around here.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got an unfinished.
Lehman
Oh
Russ.
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Never anything finished.
No. And sometimes I paint models if I'm writing a novel about something in particular. I'll buy that model, particularly some of the Forge World things, like some of the tanks and airplanes. I'll paint them, and again, I paint them really, really horrifically badly. I'm not a great painter, but I'll build them and paint them, so I get a real sense just of working on them for several days of them from every angle and every little detail like that. So when I write about them, it's not as a picture that I've seen on a page and I can imagine. It's something that I can, like a kid, can pick up and go, whoosh, and you get a much greater sense of what it is and what it would move like and that kind of stuff. And that, I think, is another important thing. So yes, not the straight answer you were expecting.
No, that's
pretty
great.
cool. And you said about they get different things. I'm a models guy. Ricky is likes to win regardless of what.
I like to play the game. I'm not the best painter. I like to play the game. My nephew likes to build, so it's kind of like all of us have got different aspects.
So we totally appreciate that. We were we used to play X-Wing. We still play X-Wing, but haven't played it for a while, and that's all about the models as well. Because of the way the game works.
That's more about pushing X-Wings around the table, going pew pew pew.
that to me, that I can see immediately as an X-Wing. I've seen it so many times, and that appeals to me enormously, because that's the sort of game I could imagine getting lost in completely. It turns out of all the Games Workshop games, it may have just been a coincidence, or I had a lucky night. But the one game I seem to be particularly successful at is Battlefleet Gothic.
Right.
I appear to be a great commander of ships. I've often looked at X-Wing and go, well, I love Star Wars. I'm good at Battlefleet. That's very appealing, but so far I've not made that transition. And
I'm going to say, don't do it. X-Wing was my gateway into the hobby, the gaming side of Swansea Comic and Gaming Convention. We did it for a YouTube video, and one of the guys that we know said, I'll show you X-Wing, and it was Star Wars. The miniatures were built. They were already painted. I went, I really like this. And then...
And now we're about 300 quid in the search.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's just X-Wing. I've got hundreds of unpainted Plague Marines in this room now.
I stopped. Video games are for me, I just collect most of consoles as well. My question is, it's even more lighthearted than that. It's who are your favorite? No, I know this. We normally ask this somewhat casually than this. Who your comic book crushes? Crush or crushes?
Goodness me, you mean characters in comics that just me, favourite characters. When I was a kid, the Scarlet Witch made a very big impression on me. My favourite superhero, generally speaking, is Captain America. She's very difficult for a British and to rate as their favourite character, because it's not a character I would ever really get to write. No one's ever going to give a Brit Captain America to write on a regular basis, but I do like Captain America. And I was sort of lucky enough to be exactly the right age to be a reader of both Frank Miller's Daredevil when it was first began to be published, and also the Claremont Byrne Austin run on X-Men, which founded the X-Men's myth. Just still super, even though particularly in terms of the X-Men, writing style has dated a little. You can see it's a product of its age. They're still superb comics, and those characters, all of them, came to life for me. So Daredevil and Bullseye and Elektra in the Miller run, and all of the X-Men, Storm and Jean Grey and everybody, was such vivid people to me that I guess I responded to those as I imagine people respond to characters I kill off in my books now. But they had a huge effect on me, and I just completely adored them. It was very weird years later getting a chance to actually write characters that you've read as a kid. Do you think to be trusted with that responsibility is a very strange phenomenon, and then for that to go full circle. So when I was writing Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance, I was deliberately cherry picking from the bottom of Marvel's toy box all the broken characters like Star-Lord and Rocket and Groot that I'd read as a kid when they had been first tried out, and none of them had ever been particularly successful, but I'd liked them. I loved Star-Lord and stuff like that. So I sort of asked permission if I could use these sort of forgotten third or fourth rate characters that nobody else was using. And Marvel said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And you could sort of do anything you like with them, because they're not important assets like Spider-Man or Iron Man. There are certain things you can't do with those characters because they are Spider-Man and Iron Man and everything like that. But Guardians of the Galaxy, they went, yeah, whatever. We're not really paying attention. Off you go. So I did it, and I loved writing them, and I loved creating for them some kind of existence that built on what I remembered from them, and sort of propelled them into. It got a good critical acclaim. It wasn't a huge hit. It was a matter of doing things like combining Rocket and Groot, who've both been interesting characters before, but putting them together as a sort of double act. To do that and go, wow, I've got to play with these things that were literally toys when I was a kid in my imagination. And then to go 2 or 3 years later and the editor to ring up one day and said, you're not going to believe this. The next Marvel movie is going to be Guardians of the Galaxy. And to completely freak out, to go from a point where I thought I was almost the only person in the world who remembered these characters because they were so minor, to a point where they were getting to write them and that was fun, to a point where I can now step out of my front door and you can see kids with, I don't know, a Rocket Raccoon backpack. And I'm not saying that because it's like, oh, look at me, look what I did. It's just weird to have that perspective shifted of something that you felt was almost a private part of your own imagination, going bigger and bigger and bigger, and then everybody in the world knows about it, and it's just terrific. I was lucky enough to be invited on set for the Guardians movies, and to go to the premieres. And that was an extraordinary thing because there was almost a sense of it was like I'm walking into my own imagination. Yeah. Meeting characters that have lived in my head or I've just lived on the page and that kind of stuff. It's slightly disconcerting. It's great, obviously it's great to do that, but it's also slightly disconcerting. It's different to, if we were invited to, I don't know, just the set of Star Wars, we'd go, oh my God, I'm going to the set of Star Wars. How cool is this? Because it'd just be exciting to see that thing that you love. But to go to something where you've had a creative involvement in it and see that it's actually breathing and standing up and everything, and that's a weird thing. So a character, I think most enthusiastic readers, and certainly all enthusiastic writers, sort of believe the characters are real somewhere. Oh, yeah. Whether they are characters that you believe in because you read them, or characters you believe in because you write them and they're telling you what they're going to do next, whether you like it or not. So it's very, very easy to have that emotional connection to it, and as a result, can be messed around with very, very easily as well.
I think you need the emotional connection, and that's the thing. If you're, it's almost like, as you said, you're taking things out of the toy box and you're playing with them, and it's kind of passing them on and seeing other people play with those toys and acknowledging them. That's the thing. It's almost like holding up a mirror, as well. I think that's what some people forget is they get angry when people do things wrong or when they change things. Yeah. But what they forget is people will embrace things.
There sort of is no wrong.
No,
just trying different things. It always frustrates me. I mean, just Marvel characters alone. things in the movies and in comics. I go, oh God, I wouldn't have done that to that character. That doesn't mean that is wrong. It's just somebody trying something different because these are also organically living things that have lasted for decades, and you try and find ways of making it fresh and not just simply going back and doing the same story over and over and over again.
Yeah.
There's always a reset button you can hit if you need to. It's not that difficult. So.
Yeah.
No, you're totally right. I mean, I won't name characters, but there are characters I've seen that have changed and grown, and even I've gone, oh, first, and then I've gone, nope, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's just the growth of a character. Even if it seems like it's changed the character, it's actually just the character growing. You know? There's always, as you said, there's always a restart as well.
I think that's part of the when our hobbies, the genres are working correctly, we generally we should be generally accepting of all these things. We can say we don't like I didn't like that storyline because of that thing. Not hate the thing for itself and its existence. I think that's the mistake.
Yeah.
You can choose to not prefer the latest iteration of Star Trek or the new handling of a particular character in a comic. To somehow condemn and say this is a sign of collapsing moral standards and clearly nobody today knows what they do. That's when I just start going, I think you're just stuck in a bit of a rut yourself, and you just want everything to be the way it was when you were a kid, which is not the way to do it. And similarly, to dismiss stuff as being too new, I think there is a very vital role for what might be described as gatekeepers in a community like science fiction and fantasy and comics, to help people find their way to be able to recommend stuff and say, oh, if you like that, you should read this and that kind of stuff, but not in a prescriptive way. Be encouraging, and if somebody comes in and says, "This is my favourite thing ever," not to go, "Oh, yeah, it's because you haven't read the good stuff." That's. So what I'm saying is, everything should have a positive thing. Be positive in your enthusiasm. Yeah. Did you like that story? That's fantastic. Here's another story I think you'd really like because it's one of my favourites. That's a great way of doing it. Going, how ridiculous that you've only ever read that Batman story. You should read some of the proper Batman stories before you're even allowed to have an opinion. It is awful way of doing something.
That's what we like about a local comic shop. We've many a time been in the comic shop, a little one comes in, new film's out, and the parents sheepishly ask, and you all stare at them, and it's a pokey little comic shop, and they go, oh, they just want this, and you're like, and you're just falling over each other, go, well, you might want to read this, and this has come out, this is the first issue of this, and the kids are all overwhelmed, we're like, okay, we better step back, because he's going to cry for the right reasons.
But, I am very conscious that we've kept you over what you
That's
agreed to.
Absolutely fine.
But
we're just going to come in with a blanket now and a pillow and push you away.
But thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat to us. It's been amazing.
Great.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. As we seem to have so much to talk about, maybe invite me back some point in the next months and we can talk about all things we didn't get a chance to talk about today.
Yes. That would be fantastic. And let's just plug Gaunt's Ghosts. I keep saying Ghosts. Ghosts.
Ghosts, yeah.
Ghosts.
Spin-off.
These ones came from Games Emporium in Swansea. I highly recommend going there. But get them from your local Games Workshop or whatever and pick up some Black Library books. I would highly recommend the Horus Heresy ones. They were the ones that got me into the thing. And Garviel Logan specifically. And where can people find you, Dan?
They can, the easiest place to find me probably is on one. I've got two Facebook pages, Dan Abnett and Daniel Abnett, and I basically get contactable through those. Facebook is not the best way of doing it. I ran Twitter for ages, and I got deeply frustrated with Twitter, so I sort of stopped, even though my account's still open. I'm also on Instagram, but I haven't really figured out what I should be doing with it, so that's not a great thing. But you can easily message me via the Facebook pages, and I do check messages from that aren't for friends to see if there's things, questions, and I try and answer whatever I can. So that's probably at the moment the easiest way of doing it. Other than that, I'll show up on things like this and witter inanely for an hour and a half, and people go, "Oh my God, him again."
I'm sure they were as happy with us as we are. So.
Well, all the chat is saying thank you, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
We have to
and Cadia stands.
Yeah, Katie stands. There are some questions we didn't get to because of time, but we do thank everyone for joining in and throwing the questions out. Maybe we'll just carry them on next time.
So,
thanks everybody.
we'll be back on Thursday and Wednesday. I'm probably going to carry on painting these guys now, seeing as I've started. So I'll finish. And I'll be joined by maybe Sam, maybe Simon. And you can follow us on all the social medias. Just search Swansea Comic and Gaming Convention. You can find us. And if you come to our Discord, you'll be able to see the photos of what we've painted and everything. So
and if you've missed this, if you just tuned in, it'll be on YouTube. And the more you like it, share, subscribe, the less likely you're going to have that weird jargony, jumbly nonsense at the beginning. At the end of the address, it'll actually just say Swansea Comic and Gaming Convention at one point. So like, share, subscribe.
Thank you very much. Good night.